Hello. I'm Heidi Ranscombe from Consumer Focus. For those that don't know the name, we're the statutory watchdog for consumers in the UK. We work on all aspects of the energy market, including demand response energy efficiency, and we're one of the lead members of BEIC, the European Consumer Association. First of all, I want to make it very clear that we've historically supported all of the great potential for consumers of the new technologies. We understand the value for households, the likely benefit for some households of lower bills, the fact that secure energy supply will keep the lights on. And many of the potential benefits have been explained in the presentations previously. So what I want to focus on now is just some of the challenges that need to be recognised and addressed in order to assume that we do really benefit as anticipated. First of all, there is no such thing as the residential consumer. There is commonality of interests across the consumer group. We're all worried about energy bills, comfort, and in the UK there's a certain concern about too much government interference in the household. But there are many permutations of what is a consumer based on social group, fuel type, tenure, income, etc. And all of those have an impact on how you engage potentially with the technology. I could have picked any table to put up there to show the different research that's been done to try and identify consumer needs. The two that I happen to have on this slide shows that effectively a third of the GB population have some impairment that could affect how they would relate to displays for smart meters or even for the white goods. The other table is why are consumers not rushing to take advantage of all these wonderful, great energy efficiency tools and materials that are out there. Basically, when it comes to understanding how consumers engage, then we need the business impact assessments to actually investigate lower than the general consumer reaction, but rather have a distributional impact assessment to understand the reactions of the different consumer groups, in order that you can identify who would be the winners and the losers of the different technology. Get the communications right. We are currently completing research on time-of-use tariffs in the UK, for example. And although it's still early stages, what's interesting to see is that 1 in 4 consumers on time-of-use tariffs actually think that they're on the wrong tariff. Most of the consumers have actually inherited the technology. Most of them are on central gas heating. And only about half of them are using appliances late in the evening. There's obviously a lot of research out there looking at how few consumers actually understand and engage with their boiler controls. So actually understanding what motivates consumers and engages them is half the key to getting demand response right and getting our engagement in the new technology. In recent years, all of our work on sustainable choices has been pulling very much from what our ministry has called the 4 E's. For the sake of simplicity and time here, we interpret this very much as being the obvious conclusion. You can't have one single policy to engage consumers. You need a national strategy. You need to understand and coordinate the different strategies. So, for example, ease of use for consumers. For some time in the UK, consumers have had access to free loft insulation, but they're not taking it up. So with the new policies, what we hope very much is that you'll see new services offered so that they're combined with loft clearing schemes, for example. Some of the barriers to actually consumers taking this up. The automated technology, as we've heard, actually takes away some of the need for behavioural change by making life easier. Communications is another key issue. There's a lot of focus now on empowering consumers to take advantage. Well, the market that we've heard described is actually more complex than the market we've got today. So again, if we're talking about engaging consumers, then we need to think about what are the communications that enable them to understand and engage in the market. Already, you can have quite a complex choice of different tariffs. If you want to change supply, you want to be able to obviously compare your current bill with what somebody else is offering you. So actually understanding what it takes to make the comparability easy is key. The time of use research unsurprisingly showed that about half of the customers would actually appreciate to have more information on time of use. we have, in the UK, a number of the more lower income consumers tend to be on prepayment meters. One example is if they want to get to the information that they need most of all, i.e. how much do they owe, they have to push the meter on the button 20 times to get there. Some of the early research on IHD showed that the designs hadn't actually been designed specifically for easy consumer engagement, and this is something that we're working on with manufacturers now. The other aspect on quality of services, anybody looking at behavioural change programs obviously knows it's very hard to get the range of consumers engaged. So it's not rocket science to appreciate that if your first experience is a bad one, you're going to be harder to get back, and you won't exactly be promoting it towards other consumers. So questions like, how do you direct consumers to quality suppliers is more than regulation, is actually quite key. So this is where the accreditation discussions, for example, in the Energy Efficiency Directive come up. We know in Germany, I understand, there is a list of suppliers that consumers can go to for energy efficiency supplies, services. But certainly the Consumer Association is not that taken with the list because it doesn't guarantee the quality. In terms of protections, we've had, one example I've used with some of my colleagues here previously is a consumer on a Scottish smart meter trial. And he duly changed his usage as he was signalled by his IHD in order to get the better rate, and yet his bill came in higher. When he challenged this, the question was, well, was it the display or was it the tariff? If it had been the display, he would have had to send the display off, pay for the postage, and also pay for the cost of checking it if it hadn't been the fault, if it had been the supplier. Basically, there were two different regulatory systems, depending on whether it's the IHD or the supply. The consumer just wants one place to go. So basically, there are some issues that could actually make life easier for consumers, could encourage them to engage more. And this isn't preaching for more regulation, simply better regulation. So the fact that business impact assessment should be based on a distributional basis, the different consumer categories. Some consumers will benefit from certain technologies, others won't. How do you need to design the policies to make them fair? As I've mentioned, what is the right consumer information for empowerment to enable them to compare like-for-like deals? Joining up regulatory processes so that we don't have to worry about 3 different regulators. If there's a problem, there's one place to go and there's a quick way to sort it out. Interoperability, one of the other key issues is if we invest in the technology, whether it's the white goods, the smart meters, or the communications within the home. If we move house, if we change suppliers, we want to ensure that that investment will keep working. That comes down to interoperability standards. It does need to cover that far. And then finally, just looking at how far the regime is appropriate for the new technology. So, for example, as we get new options, if consumers decide to override controls, what are the rules? What are the penalties? These kind of issues do need thinking about now, because they are going to be our first experience of the markets, and they will determine whether we come back. Thank you.